Hello, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, which is Navigating CMMC Fundamentals and Certification Preparation. Hello, my name is Suzanne Strasser, your moderator for today's session. For many defense contractors, the hardest part of CMMC is not the technology, it's figuring out where to begin. Between the framework itself, the different certification levels, the difference between federal contract information or FCI and controlled unclassified information or CUI, and all the terminology that comes with it, it can be hard to know what any of this actually applies to your business. So today's goal is to make that simpler. We're going to walk through the fundamentals of CMMC, explain how FCI and CUI shape your requirements, clarify the certification paths contractors may see today, and talk through the practical preparation steps companies should take before moving toward an assessment. I'm joined today by Scott Dawson, President of Core Business Solutions. Scott has provided NIST and CMMC education for more than 6 years and brings the compliance and business strategy perspective to today's discussion. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Appreciate it. Back 6 years ago, I had more hair, but now I'm working on CMMC, and that's what happens.
Yes. All right, well, let's start with the big picture today, Scott.
Yep.
So, for companies that are still new to this, what really is CMMC and what problem is it meant to solve?
Yep, great place to start. So CMMC is the Department of Defense's framework to verify that contractors, subcontractors are protecting information related to the contract. That would be the federal contract information or FCI, controlled unclassified information. And so the CMMC is a certification that demonstrates the systems that are handling those documents are secure to the level that is required. So it's a verification framework, not just a cybersecurity awareness and that type of thing. So it's a formal certification. And for small businesses, it's key because in order to continue to work within the defense industrial base, to have a defense-related contract, it's now becoming a requirement to even participate in these contracts to have a CMMC certification. So from a technical point of view, it's not really about buying the right technologies per se. It starts with understanding, which systems protect, store, or transmit the scope, the information that we're talking about with FCI and CUI.
Right. Okay. So a lot of companies still feel like they're hearing mixed messages. So is CMMC something that contractors really need to treat as real now? And where does the CMMC rollout stand today?
Yeah, great question. For 6 years we've been saying it's coming.
Yes.
And now we have to say it's here. And so the CMMC requirement, if you see anything that says it's pending, even looking on our older webinars, you're going to see we're talking about it being pending because those were prior to the release of the formal rules. The first rule was in December of 2024, 32 CFR Part 170. You don't have to remember the number in the quiz. But that first rule defined how the certification works. Who's going to do the assessments? What standard are we going to be audited to? What are the different levels of certification that are going to be available? When are those applicable? All the rules around CMMC came out in 2024. And then the most recent rule was in November of 2025, just last year. And that's where it was a rule for contract officers on how and when to put CMMC certification requirements into contracts. So the first rule was for contractors. The second rule was for the government to start to include CMMC in contracts. So phase one of this rollout started in November 25. It continues to 2026. November 2026 this year, and then they go on to phase two.
Okay.
So one other thing, Suzanne, phase one, where we are right now, It's optional to require formal certification, but it's mandatory that companies self-assess to these standards. So we're not yet at the point where all contracts require formal
Right.
certification, third-party certification. But in preparation of that, they're saying we're expecting suppliers to implement these requirements and attest to their compliance, self-assessment. And that way is a demonstration that the suppliers are on the right path.
Okay. All right. I didn't mention earlier, but if you have questions, folks, throughout the presentation today, just put them in the Q&A section. I'm trying to monitor that as we go, and we'll
Great.
either answer them as we go or at the end. All right, so now for smaller contractors, what does this really mean in practical terms? I mean, why should they pay attention now, even if they're still trying to figure out exactly what applies to them?
Yeah, I think that's the key question, is what applies. And it starts with the question of, do we process, store, or transmit FCI or CUI or both? So what that means is, if you have a contract related to the Defense Department, whether you're the prime on the contract or you're on the Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, the requirement to protect FCI and CUI must flow down through those contracts. So your customer should include the requirements that you need to meet in the contract you have with them. So it's important to know whether that requirement is in your contract.
Okay.
Then the second part of that is, where is that information kept? How is that information handled within our organization? So let's imagine a simple example where a manufacturer gets a blueprint on a part that needs to be made. So that blueprint would be CUI. It might arrive through an email, or it could arrive through a customer portal that you log into to download documentation related to the contract. However it arrives, but it arrives in some manner, so the online system or the computer system that's used to receive that information is part of the protection. The data needs to be protected. Then it might be forwarded to someone else in your company, so now it's in your email system. It might be saved into a folder that's on your SharePoint or on your network. So now that SharePoint is protecting the information.
Right.
It might be sent to your supplier to get some component parts or some processing. Maybe some, the part needs to be painted or heat treated or something, and you need to send it out. Now that documentation is being sent externally, which brings in additional complications that you need to flow down those requirements to that supplier, et cetera, et cetera. But it's about what information do we have, where is it, what systems is it handled on or accessed from, and then how do we make sure those systems are secure.
Okay, great. We had a couple people ask about the presentation itself. Yes, it'll be available afterwards.
Yep, as will a link to the recording.
Yes, so that's that question. We also had a question, Scott, which I think is, I know the answer, but if you want to talk about the differences. So the question was, is the self-assessment level 2 the same as a C3PAO level 2 in terms of satisfying the requirements?
Yeah, it's the same criteria.
Right.
So a level, we haven't talked about all the levels yet, but there's a level 1 certification of CMMC, there's a level 2, there's a level 3, and whether it's a self-assessment or an external assessment, it's the same criteria. Those are the same.
But doesn't carry the same.
Well, it serves the same purpose in phase 1 because that's the requirement.
Correct. Yes, right.
But as soon as it's required that you have a third party do the assessment, now that's the requirement.
Yes.
In both cases, you're assessing against the same standard.
Same criteria. Okay.
Yep.
Good. All right, hopefully that helped. All right, so a lot of this depends on one core question, right, which was what you're just talking about. So what kind of information are you actually handling? So that's where a lot of confusion starts. So let's go there next. So in plain English, please,
Yep.
sir, what's the difference between FCI and CUI, and why does that distinction matter so much?
Well, it matters because the level of security is different, and the reason for that is the level of sensitivity of that information is different. In other words, the repercussions if that information is stolen is very severe if it's CUI. It's moderately severe if FCI. So
Right.
they have two different levels of security requirements, one for each of these types of documents. So FCI, or Federal Contract Information, is relevant to any supplier working in the defense industrial base that has a contract, because it's contract information related to a federal contract. So that could be the RFP, the bid you put in based on an RFP. It could be the communication back and forth as you're working through the details on a contract with your customer. It could be a schedule of shipments. It could be your pricing. So any documentation or information related to the federal contract is FCI. That would require level 1 protections. That's a shorter list, much shorter list of requirements of the two. There are 17 security practices for level 1. Level 2 protects CUI. So controlled unclassified information is what that stands for. And that is information typically about the products and services being manufactured or the people that are involved. So PII and other kinds of things can be involved. But CUI is much more sensitive. It's not the classified level of information. That's why it's called unclassified. But it needs to be protected or controlled. So it's a government-wide program. CUI is not just a DoD program. It's a government-wide program to mark unclassified sensitive information. They call it CUI. And it requires much more stringent security protection, 110 requirements versus the 17 for level 1. So they both matter, but CUI has to be protected at a higher level, I guess the way to say it.
Yep. Okay, so once a company understands those definitions, how should a company think about, where the data lives, who touches it, what's that mean for the scope?
Yeah. So scope is other than knowing which type of information you're handling and the certification level. I mean, I guess that's step 0, if you will. The first step in preparing is determining where data is received, where it is stored, who accesses it, from what devices do they access it, is it in electronic form, is it in paper form? In both cases, where does that information get routed? Where does it get stored? If at the end of a project you destroy it, how does it get destroyed? What about data backup? So now there are copies of that data in maybe an off-site backup location. Maybe you're using a cloud-based email system like Microsoft 365, which is cloud-based. So now the data is not just on your company computers, it's out in the cloud somewhere, being hosted by someone. So you have to worry over the information when it's on external systems, and then the who accesses it, when they access it, and who shouldn't have access. So all of those questions could be, well, we put the data in a folder in our network, and when people need it, they go to the folder to view it or access it or print it out or whatever they may need to do with it. And so if that's the case and anyone in your company can access it from any device in your company's network, then your entire company is in scope. All of the devices and computers in your company are in scope. Perhaps then all the online systems that you're using, such as email, and maybe there's file storage that's in the cloud or things like that. SharePoint is a cloud-based system as well, for example. So the scope includes the people, the systems, the facilities, the locations, where this data exists, and where that data is accessed from. All of that then falls under the umbrella of this certification. So if you don't limit the scope, in other words, prevent some devices from getting to it, limit it to just a few people, don't keep the data accessible in all of your cloud systems. Don't access it from home through your dial-up network, or that's old school.
Yeah, that's old.
But from your remote location. So you start to limit those things. That's reducing your scope, which can make this whole thing a lot simpler and less expensive and easier to implement. And those are choices. It's a decision on how much access you're going to give to this information and how much you're going to restrict access to this information. The biggest question you can absolutely work on right now without paying any money to anyone is to start thinking about who really needs to have access to this information, and can we reduce the access, the way this is all being accessed and handled, to just a few computers or one system or two individuals, or whatever you can do to reduce that scope is going to pay dividends down the road.
Yes. Yeah, I know that when our sales team talks to folks, the first thing they talk about is the workflow, right? Even in the upfront sales call.
Yeah.
That's the most
Yeah, so
important.
workflow is a way to think about scope. So it's like the life cycle of that data, right? So first it comes in here, and then so-and-so looks at it, and then it goes over there to get reviewed, and then it might go out here to get printed, and then it goes to the shop floor in a printed format for the part to be turned, or it goes out to the shop floor on a thumb drive to load the data into the CNC machine to turn the part, et cetera, et cetera. And now you're visually mapping out the route of the life cycle of that information, which helps you envision the scope, all the different ways in which that information needs to be protected.
Okay. We're getting a number of questions here. I'm going to hold them for a bit because I think some of them may be answered, and some of them are about specific industries, which I think the general advice is check your contracts.
Check your contracts.
Because it'll tell you if it's
that's
or not.
Important point, because we don't have to guess whether it's required.
Yeah.
We look in our contract and read to see if the requirement is there. And if you're working in a defense-related industry, whether it's a service or a product or whatever it is you're providing, and you don't see it in your contract, but you kind of expected it to be there because of you're in the defense industrial base, I would call the customer and say, listen, maybe this current contract we haven't put the requirement in. Is this something I have to plan for in the future? Future contracts or future orders, I'm going to see this requirement change. Do your homework and find out what the requirement is going to be so you can start preparing.
Yeah, and to what level? And you're going to talk about
and to what level
in a little bit.
Yep.
All right, so what are some common mistakes that you see when companies try to decide whether they're dealing with FCI, CUI, or both?
Yeah. Okay, so I've talked about cost, and I want to keep coming back to that because especially, for the small businesses that are in this webinar, which, by the way, has a record attendance, which is kind of interesting. It kind of corresponds with the rule is real, and now people are paying attention.
That's right.
Okay, so I'll just comment on that. But thank you all for joining us. Appreciate it very much. But you asked me about mistakes. So mistake number one would be over-scoping, not just by giving everyone access to everything that comes into the network, which is probably uncommon that you'd actually do that. But the other way to over-scope, over-complicate, and overspend, coming back to that, is treating everything as if it's CUI. In other words, we're just going to protect everything so that we're safe. The better safe than sorry type of thing. So you throw the blanket over the entire business and say, we're just going to raise everything up to that level, and we're going to get all of it certified just to be safe, just to be cautious. But you're likely driving the cost up unnecessarily unless defense-related contracts is the primary focus of your business. So I think there's probably a distinction between those that primarily work in the defense industry. So majority of your customers are all going to be flowing the same requirement down to you. So you're going to probably better just go ahead and certify your whole system. But if DoD-related work is only a part of your business, or you only have a single contract, boy, narrowing it down is important because you're not making all your revenue off of that one contract, so you want to kind of get your costs in line with the revenue attached to that, right? So narrowing the scope, narrowing the cost is really important. The other extreme would be underscoping and saying, well, most of the time the data is right there, so we're going to protect that.
Right.
Or making some assumptions that, gee, the email system we received it in isn't part of the scope. Well, it is. So drawing the boundaries is important. Drawing them too big can be really expensive. Drawing it too small can be expensive because you may pay for the assessment twice, which those things aren't cheap. I'm just saying. We're not an assessor, but they are not inexpensive, and you want to get through the assessment the first time successfui. So that's important.
I'll put you on the spot a little bit
Yeah,
on
go
some
ahead.
of these. There is a related question about who defines what is or what isn't FCI or CUI.
The government.
Yeah, but it's
But it's not clear.
It's not clear.
Because I mentioned that CUI is well, FCI doesn't have to be marked. It's any data related to a federal contract. Okay, so that one's almost easier. CUI is the special category, and in the federal government CUI program, there's a CUI marking policy that is supposed to be, I'm going to put that in air quotes. Is that okay to put it in air quotes?
Sure.
Supposed to be deployed throughout the federal government, and the government should be marking documents as CUI. That rule has been out as long as I didn't have hair, right? It's been years that this policy's been out there, and it's still not consistent. That marking is not consistent. However, in the CUI rules, it says whether or not it's marked, you must protect it.
Right.
So it brings a lot of confusion. If in doubt, call your customer and have a conversation about, should this be treated as CUI or FCI?
Okay. All right, so once you know how to handle that data,
Yep.
right? The next question that people usually want to know is what level applies to us and what kind of an assessment are we actually preparing for? So can you walk us through the CMMC levels and again in plain English and explain how the assessment types fit into those levels?
Yep. So I mentioned earlier three levels overall, and they're levels of increased security protection. So level 1 is the simplest level. I was going to say lowest level. That's not really true. These are important protections for FCI, for federal contract information, and there are 17 of them. They come out of the FAR 52 regulation. These are 17 requirements that come out of the NIST standard that defines level 2. So that's like they picked 17 of the basic certification protections and made that list to say, as a minimum, you have to implement these 17 protections. And by the way, we're not going to require third-party audits for level 1.
Right.
That was a big concession, I think, in the whole development of, it was worth waiting the 6 years just to hear you don't have to have a third-party audit for level 1. So level 1 is a self-assessment annually. It's mandatory that you do a self-assessment, and it's mandatory that you report the result of your self-assessment, and it's mandatory that that an executive within your company signs their name that the assessment is true and honest. So there's accountability, even though it's not a third-party assessment. It's a self-assessment. It'll continue to be a self-assessment, and once a year you have to update your assessment results, okay? Then level 2 steps up is a big step. Not like the little steps I like to walk up, but the big step that goes from 17 controls to 110 controls that are itemized in the NIST 800-171 standard. So again, CMMC is certification. NIST is the technical requirement. These are two documents that go hand in hand. The NIST requirement lists out 110 protections in a number of what they call families or topics. These are significant security protections that for most small businesses are a big step forward.
Right.
In other words, it goes beyond what you would maybe normally implement for cybersecurity in your company, or that was set up on your computer system by your managed service provider, or however your computers are protected today. I assure you there's more to do in that 110 when you start to itemize the things that we have and the things we don't have. But that's level 2 is NIST SP 800-171, revision 2. This gets a little geeky here, but while all this is being rolled out, NIST updated the 800-171 standard.
Right.
There's a revision 3 floating out there. It's not relevant to CMMC today. The DoD specifically says we're going to use level 2 or revision 2 and stick with it for now. For I would guess for another couple years.
Okay.
So you get a copy of the revision 2 standard and audit yourself, do a self-assessment against that. Next year, well, November this year, when third-party audits start being written into contracts for level 2, again,
Which is how
level
you know
1.
if you need one,
Yeah.
right?
This is how you know you need one. It's in your contract.
It's in your contract. Yep.
But if level 2 is in your contract today, then plan ahead and say, I know I'm going to need an assessment. There is a very small exception that people will point to and say, yeah, but in the rule it says that a few level 2 contracts with level 2 certification requirements will allow for self-assessment. What I've heard is that's going to be very rare. The vast majority will be third-party assessments. Okay, so if you are handling CUI and level 2 is required, then you will have a third-party assessment required to bid on a contract potentially starting in November this year. Therefore, today it's important to start implementing all these things and lining up your assessment so that you don't miss out on the next round of contracts that you might want to participate in, or a renewal, or an contract extension.
Sure.
All of those things can trigger these requirements. Then there's an advanced requirement or level called level 3. It's going to apply to a very small number of highly sensitive programs, and it's the highly sensitive CUI, and it's not audited by a C3PAO. I forgot to explain that acronym. The CMMC third-party assessor organizations, in other words, the auditors. Those are private firms. Level 3 requires the government to do the audit through a group called DIBCAC. So level 1, 17, level 2, 110, level 3, 132, I may be off by 1 or 2 there. And the scrutiny for certification goes up with each level.
Of course, yeah.
Thank you, audience, for the applause. Appreciate that.
Okay, so one phrase that also causes a lot of confusion is self-assessment versus third-party certification. So we've been talking about that a little bit, but how should small businesses think about that difference today?
Yeah. First difference, well, let's talk about what's the same.
Okay.
What's the same is a self-assessment is still formal and has to be reported, just like a third-party assessment is formal and has to be reported. Those are the same. The 110 requirements are the same, whether you're doing a self-assessment or you have a third-party assessment. Those are the same. The difference is a self-assessment, you're going to make your own determination as to whether you're satisfying the requirement based on the information that's provided. And there are detailed instructions for how to do your assessment in what's called 171A. And you need to do your due diligence and do your level best to do an accurate self-assessment, because you're going to report those results. Someone's going to sign off personal accountability for those results, and the government will hold you to those results. When a third-party assessment occurs, then you're bringing in a formal, a trained, certified assessor, and they are expert in this. They're very experienced cybersecurity experts. They know the government requirements very much. They've been certified and gone through extensive training, and these are extensive audits. These are days-long audits. No matter the size of your company, you're in a 3 to 5 day audit, the smallest. If you're a moderately sized business, you may be in an audit for 2 weeks. These are extensive audits. They involve more than one assessor. So guess who gets to pay for all of this, right? So the cost is much more significant once a C3PAO is conducting the assessment. But this is how the government gains the real assurance that these protections are adequately put in place. If there's good news in all of this, because I hate to just talk about all the cost and the expense and the difficulty. If there's good news in this, unlike an ISO audit where you're audited every year, these are only every 3 years. It's a bargain, right?
Yeah.
However, you do a self-assessment in the intermediate 2 years. So you're doing annual reporting every 3rd year. You have to bring in a third-party assessor to do the audit. Now, again, this year, phase 1, the contract officers don't have to put third-party audits into the contracts. They don't have to. I didn't say they weren't allowed to. It doesn't prevent your customer from saying, before the government requires this, we're going to require it now, so that you're prepared, and therefore we're prepared for when the government requirements kick in. So you could be seeing C3PAO assessment requirements in your contract now, even though we're in phase 1.
Right.
So, and those are real requirements. And by the way, your customer can require those things because they're trying to get prepared for their assessment, which will include, are your suppliers certified? So to some degree, many of the prime contractors are getting a jump start on this, pushing these requirements out right away.
There are some questions about ballpark cost.
Yeah, we could talk about that, sure.
Yeah.
For the assessments, I
assessment,
presume.
yeah.
So if you're thinking about costs, you've got, I guess, let's think about 3 ways you've got a budget. One is all the preparations. You got to get your systems up to the level to be ready for the assessment. You got to get your people ready. You got to get your facility ready. You got to, there's a lot of things, right? So let's just say we could snap our fingers and all that was done for $1.50.
Right.
Or more.
Or more.
Now the assessment, it's going to be based on number of days. The least expensive assessments I've seen for even the smallest of companies is in the $30,000 to $40,000 range. And now, let's see, we have 125 people online right now. 110 of them just fell off their chair.
Yeah.
Right? These are expensive assessments. Bigger the assessment, the closer to six figures you get.
Right.
A bigger company is going to be in six figures easily for these assessments. This is why you want to be absolutely prepared
Right.
for that assessment, so you only have to go through it once, because during an assessment, if it looks like you're going to fail, the assessor can call timeout and reschedule the assessment that you get to pay for again. So these are very stringent requirements and quite costly assessments. The third cost area is maintaining your systems, because every year you're going to turn in a self-assessment report, and every 3 years you're going to have that third-party assessment again. So the third-party assessment cost is going to recur.
Right.
But ongoing, maintaining all those security requirements on an ongoing basis, you can't just wait till every 3 years and then brush everything up. You got to
Right.
keep everything current and protected and compliant with the standard. So, yeah, having some plan to narrow the scope and getting some help to make sure you're doing it right the first time is worth the money.
Okay.
I mean, I know we provide
I know,
the services,
yeah.
and I'm not trying to make this a commercial, but it is why we're in this business at all, because our customers were saying, we got to meet these requirements. We're scared to death of them. We don't know how to do it. We don't even have an IT guy. And we've got to tackle this thing. Can you walk us through? And so that's kind of how we started 6 years ago. And now we've gone further with it to help this, not just the webinars, but other ways we help to simplify all of this, going forward.
Okay. All right, so moving on here. If a company is trying to make sense of its likely level without making assumptions, what's the safest way to evaluate that early? So how do they determine their path?
Yep, start with the contract, start with the solicitation. If you don't have the contract yet, talk to your customer if it's not clear. Make sure you know what the contract requirement is going to be. Is the contract going to include CUI or not? In other words, the exchange of this technical information, is that going to be part of it? If not, then you're level 1. If it is, it's level 2, okay? Make sure you're clear about what the requirement is in your contract. That's the easiest way to get clarity for that question. So I guess that's the shortcut.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. Okay, so I've got the framework, the data types, possible levels. Okay, so what should a contractor actually have in place before thinking seriously about an assessment? So before they even talk about scheduling, what should it have in place first?
All right. If you haven't fallen off your chair,
Besides the money,
buckle up here, right?
yes.
Again, we're trying to stay high level today, right? Not dig into all
Yep.
the details. But we've talked about scope. They call that the boundary. That is the users, the people that access this information, whether it's FCI or CUI. The systems, the computer systems in your company's control, or third-party systems like Microsoft and such. The locations where people can access this information. So the office area that you're in, you need to have a visitor log to know who's in the building. You need to protect people from being able to look over people's shoulder to see CUI. You need to be sure you have a clean desk policy. So, like I don't, because I have this paper all over, right? But making sure you're not leaving your computer open when you're not on, by it, whatever. If you're in a factory or you're in a shop, that's part of the location. So the locations, and the providers, like if you have someone come in and work on your servers, they can access your CUI. So now they're in scope, okay? So scope is kind of level 1. Then the documentation. This is an extremely heavy documentation. That's not a great sentence, is it? There's a lot of documentation required.
Document heavy. Yeah.
Very document heavy.
Yes.
Much more than ISO.
Yes.
So many of our customers are ISO 9001 certified or AS 9100 certified, the quality standards. Some of our customers have a information security standard called ISO 27001, and that has more documentation, certainly, and more proof. CMMC takes it all to a new level, because If you can't demonstrate in a policy, written policy or procedure, that you have the control in place, in other words, you're explaining how you're protecting, how you've implemented multi-factor authentication, or how you've implemented encryption, or how you've implemented user access controls. So you explain all that in your documentation. Then you got to go over and prove it. It's a show and tell exercise. Show me how that's set up. And the assessor's going to want to see that what you said here is what's going on.
Right.
I'm pointing to my computer. I don't know if everybody can see that, but what's going on in your systems, and they want proof that what you wrote in the so the documentation includes a system security plan, or SSP, very extensive document that explains all 110 controls and how you've implemented all 110 controls, network diagrams, data flows, shared responsibility matrices, different kinds of diagrams, policies and procedures I mentioned, documented inventory of systems that you have, software that you have, people that access, assets that you have, and how evidence is available, what evidence is available. Then you've got the actual technical security controls on your systems, like multi-factor authentication, access control, logging, which I didn't have any idea how big a deal that was. But every computer system, every phone, every device keeps track of all the activity, either that the user is conducting with the keyboard, or what's going on the network in the behind the scenes. And there's a detailed log that goes on, because that log keeps a record of everything that happened on that machine. And that log could have a record that there was an intrusion or an attempted intrusion. That could be an artifact if there was a security breach. So logging is important, backups of data, incident response basics, all those kind of things. And then the evidence side of it, and ownership. People have to be responsible to maintain this information, and you need to keep it up to date. So it's extensive. It's extensive, and the reason is, I didn't really say this, but the reason is this sensitive information getting into the wrong hands, say an adversary of our U.S. country, right? And a lot of the defense contracts are related to the defense of our country. And a lot of the information could be used by people in the wrong, people who have infiltrated and stolen the information. Yep. They could use it against our warfighters. They could use it against our airmen and our soldiers and our Marines. And it could put people in harm's way because an adversary got their hands on a drawing and could figure out, oh, there's a weakness here, and I could exploit that weakness. So that's why it's all being protected, is to protect our nation and our nation's warfighters. But I got a little off track there, Suzanne, sorry about that. But it's important, that's why all this is, we're going to this level as a country, right? Okay. Yeah.
All right, so one thing you did mention was documentation. Let's talk a little bit more about the importance of ownership and planning. So it's a lot more than technical controls. So.
Yep. Yeah, it's more than technical controls. So you need someone at the executive level, at the business level, to take personal accountability for the effective implementation of these security controls. So someone at the business level has to be responsible for this system. That's not likely to be your IT guy.
Right.
IT has a big role to play here, but they can't take contractual ownership over this. That has to be an executive of the company signing off on these annual assessments. So that's one role. Then you need accountable people over different aspects of the system, whether that's training or IT or third-party vendors or whatever the case may be, and then coordinate all of this to make sure everything is ready to go, and make sure people are trained on the safe practices that they need to follow, and make sure the people who are going to interact with the assessor are well prepared and well trained. And then, of course, we talked about documentation earlier. and how important it is that if you don't have it documented, you can't prove it.
Right.
They're not going to take your word for it. They're going to expect documentation and evidence for each detail.
Yep. Okay. So for smaller organizations, let's go back to this, who don't want to overbuild or drag their whole company into scope, what does a smarter preparation approach look like?
Yeah, it's important, especially if you want to continue work in the defense industry. Mm-hmm. Now, you could decide this is all too much and too expensive, and you decide not to pursue defense contracts. Perfectly legitimate business choice. It also takes one more great company out of our defense industrial base, which is not a good thing. So it's important that you, as a small business, you're honest with yourself, and you do a careful gap assessment. You evaluate how close or how far away you are from compliance. You carefully think about scope reduction. And the gaps that you do have, what's the budget for those things? How much are they going to cost? Do we have someone who can implement them? Mm-hmm. How are we going to monitor that all this is successful? So the more homework you do up front to carefully assess yourself, not put you don't want to just score yourself easy. Score yourself hard on your gap assessment, because I assure you the third-party assessor will score you hard.
Don't do it like I'm logging my food for myself.
There you go. That's right.
That's not a good
exactly
idea.
Exactly right. So I think that's the starting point for a smarter approach. Now, I think I lost track here, Suzanne. I apologize. Are we on 9 or 10?
We're here.
On 11.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. See, guys, I am behind.
I got you.
We're doing this real time.
Yep.
If they didn't realize this, this is not pre-recorded. But now, the other thing to keep in mind is that third-party providers are part of this, and you have to show documentation of their compliance as well. So what does all this mean for a small business? If you don't have the capability or the budget to do all this security yourself, there's an off-ramp. It's called an enclave. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean? It means you, instead of handling your FCI or CUI on your computer systems, you offload it, you move it off of your computer systems into a secure system called an enclave, and that enclave is pre-built and managed to those security requirements, and then you protect the information in there. So, for example, we provide an enclave. It's called the Core Vault. If anyone wants information, get in touch. Core Vault is a secure cloud environment that's built to meet CMMC requirements. We have customers that are already certified using the Vault, so it's been thoroughly assessed. Our consultants are very good at walking everyone through how to be prepared for an assessment and being successful using the Vault. So if you can picture your workflow whereby instead of keeping CUI on your local computers, you put it into a cloud system called an enclave, and then from your computer you access the enclave. It's just like a shared desktop. It's like a remote computer that you're logging into. But if you could imagine, asking people, listen, when you are working on a defense contract, click this button, go into this system, and always send and receive information related to the contract there. The Vault has email and Microsoft Office and all the things you would need to manage that information. But our security team is managing that system on your behalf. It also means getting prepared can be faster because you don't have to set it all up. And it can be less expensive because you don't have to set it all up. And it's a service that you can, but that's a way for a small business to at least get over step one. Maybe we want to get through our first assessment as soon as we can, and then later we might want to include our whole company. But this first round, we might say, let's just narrow down where we're keeping it. Let's keep it all on an enclave, and let's get that system certified, and then we can be good to go on our contracts. It's been really a godsend for our customers because
Right.
they I don't know how we would ever do this on our own. And the answer is Core Business Solutions and others provide enclaves for this very purpose.
Right. There was a question about grants being available, and yes, we've seen some. So, and there's some MEPs and Apex accelerators on today. So
Yeah, I would talk to
I
your
would
local MEP
absolutely.
or Apex Accelerator about
Yep.
grants in your industry or in your state.
Yeah.
That's why they co-sponsor this series, because they are connected to a lot of resources that can be helpful.
Right. Okay. All right. So we're down to, like, I think the most practical question of all. So if somebody leaves today knowing they need to act,
Yep.
what should they do next without getting overwhelmed?
Yep. So let's do a 30, 60, 90
Yep.
roadmap here.
Yep.
So first thing for the next 30 days, check your contracts. Look for the flow down language in your contract. Look for references to FCI and CUI, or NIST 800-171, or DFARS 252, 204, 7012, and other requirements. If you want details on that, just send us an email and we'll get you some more information on that. But check your contract. Determine what information is being received or handled to execute that contract, and whether it's FCI or CUI. Get an internal owner assigned. Get somebody assigned to take this project on, and make sure you're clear about who's going to be the executive sponsor, and then work on your scope, and then take a breath and determine which path we are going to take. Are we going to try to certify all of our systems? Are we going to try to certify a part of our system? Are we going to go to a third-party enclave? What approach might we use? That'd be kind of the first phase. Then, as you proceed, and if you're not going to use if you're going to proceed at that point, then a gap assessment's important. Even our customers that use our vault go through a gap assessment because there are internal procedures that still need to be implemented. So there's a gap assessment, then all the documentation, which there can be help to get documentation together, address the technical controls, get a budget together for those things, and then on the 90-day side, go back to the boundary and say, does this still making sense?
Right.
Could we narrow it? Complete your system security plan and required diagrams, and continue to deploy. Some companies, this could take a year to 18 months to get prepared because it's a complicated environment and a larger client or company with a lot of people and a lot of data, and you really need professional assistance to get all of that in place. So even no matter what path you go on, I advise you get some level of help.
Right.
So you don't waste a lot of time and money on this. But those would be my suggestions.
Okay. And then you do that. So then in the next 60 to 90 days, what's next?
Yep. So that's where the gap assessment documentation is in 60, and then finalizing your documentation and getting your budget together is in kind of the 90-day window. So.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So we've covered a lot of ground today, I think.
Yep.
I've seen a number of questions come in. I've got some here. We can't answer them all, but
We'll get back an email to
For
people
sure.
if
Yeah.
we don't get to it here.
okay.
Yeah.
Some are about industries. So, is construction contracting being affected? That's one example.
Yes. If
yeah,
they're working
right.
on a military base,
Yep.
yes.
Yes.
If you're working under a government contract here in the U.S. or overseas, yes.
But, right.
Are the drawings of the base sensitive? Yes.
Right.
So yeah, construction absolutely would be involved, and you need to determine what level of certification you're going to need.
Right. Let's see. We talked about cost. We talked. There's a question about incident reporting.
Yep.
They list a specific clause here, but yeah, there's definitely a section
Yeah, DFARS 252, 204, 7012. I'll
Yep.
bet I got it.
You did, very good.
Which requires incident reporting of a security incident or suspected security incident, I believe within 72 hours of when it is found. It has to be reported on the government website. You have to be set up ahead of time to do that reporting. And whomever you're working with to help you prepare will walk you through how to get set up to do incident reporting. But it's part of the requirement that you are authorized to report an incident, which requires some homework. You got to get some things set up ahead of time.
Right.
And yes, that is a requirement.
Let's see here. Somebody had gotten quotes from several C3POs, and one mentioned that an additional assessor would be needed to verify the work.
That's a true statement.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a true statement. It is a team of assessors, and there is a requirement that a second, I'll call it a second set of eyes, sometimes a third set of eyes, is reviewing all the assessment results before the certification can be issued. So yes, there will be a additional cost there.
Okay.
It's going to be part of the cost that they quote you.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, maybe one more here. So just to clarify, for non-defense contracts, do you still need FCI level 1?
No.
No.
This is all defense
This is all
department.
defense, right.
Yep. Now,
Well, there's a caveat there.
yeah, I may be wrong about that, Suzanne, because this comes out of the FAR clause, not the DFARS clause. Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation is the DFARS. Federal Acquisition Requirements is FAR. That's the commercial or the private sector contracting with non-military related. So
Check your
you
contract.
you check your contract,
Yeah.
absolutely, and look for FAR 52
Okay.
requirements in your contract. So non-defense related could have level 1 requirements.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, yeah, and there's other questions on here, and get in touch with us and we're glad to answer.
Yeah, I'll go through the list and
Yep.
send some emails out
Okay.
afterward to get some answers. And then we'll have our contact information up here in a minute where
Yep.
you guys can reach out to us and correspond, and we can answer questions or point you in the right direction.
Great. All right, well, to stay on time here. So as we wrap up, let's bring it back to the main takeaway. CMMC becomes much more manageable once you understand your data, your likely path, and your first steps. So thanks to everyone for joining us today. We hope this session gave you a clearer understanding of CMMC fundamentals, how FCI and CUI can shape your requirements, and what basic preparation should look like before you move toward an assessment. And as a quick reminder, here are the key next steps. Understand what data you handle and where it lives. Determine whether you're dealing with FCI, CUI, or both. Define a realistic boundary before you expand scope or start buying tools. And begin building the basics, so documentation, core controls, and a practical roadmap. For many small businesses, the first right move is not doing anything all at once, is really getting clarity first and then taking the next first right step. So if you need help, reach out to your local Apex Accelerator or MEP. They can be a great starting point. And of course, you can contact us here at Core Business Solutions. We're always happy to help with readiness, planning, scoping, documentation, and managed options like the Core Vault when a smaller, more focused path makes sense. Also, be sure to tune in for next month's webinar. CMMC is here. What contractors are actually experiencing in real assessments? And that's April 16th at 2 p.m. And be sure to check out our YouTube page as well as our website so you can stay up to date with our webinars and other content. Thanks again for being with us today, and we'll see you next time.